You must let me out. Give me a chance to avenge my death." Her fingers trembled as she lifted her hand and pressed it against the glass. Instantly, a force pulled her in.
The city of Lagos never slept. Neither did Mr. Olu Olabode. A ruthless aristocrat, he was relentless in his pursuit of wealth, power, and status. He worked harder than most, outmaneuvering competitors with an almost obsessive drive for perfection. His empire was built on ambition, and he ensured that nothing stood in his way. But no matter how carefully one builds an empire, a single crack can bring everything crumbling down. And Mr. Olu was about to face the one event that would shatter his perfect world beyond repair. It was a bright and sunny afternoon when Mr. Olu found himself standing in a private hospital room, staring at the fragile, swaddled figures before him. His wife, Fumi, had just given birth to twin girls, 2 daughters who should have filled him with pride. But instead, his face remained cold, unreadable. "Mr. Olu, there was a complication," the doctor had told him. "One of the twins suffered severe brain damage. She will be a special needs child for the rest of her life." Mr. Olu was mortified. This child was going to be an imbecile, a defect, a stain in the perfect world he had worked so hard to create. His stomach churned. This was not the future he had envisioned. He had spent years sculpting a flawless life, a dynasty built on excellence. And now he was expected to father an imbecile, to raise a child who would be nothing but a burden. He would not allow it. With a hardened resolve, Mr. Olu scooped up the helpless infant. Without a word, without hesitation, he turned and walked out of the hospital. No one questioned him. Why would they? He was her father. Speeding through the outskirts of Lagos, Mr. Olu gripped the steering wheel tightly. His destination was a construction site, a new branch of his company, still under development. It was the perfect place. It was deserted, no witnesses. Stepping out of the car, he moved swiftly, his mind eerily calm. He powered on the cement mixer, watching as the grey sludge of wet cement churned and thickened. And then, without flinching, he did what no father should ever do. He threw his newborn daughter into the mixer. The baby's cry pierced the air as she fell into the whirring drum. The sound echoed against the half-finished walls, swallowed by the hum of the machine. It didn't last long. When the cries stopped, Mr. Olu worked quickly. He poured the cement onto a half-built wall, sealing the infant within its depths. By the time he stepped back, his hands were coated in wet cement. The work was flawless. No one would ever know. No one would ever suspect. The chemicals in the cement would mask any smell, erase any trace. It was the perfect graveyard. The baby was gone. Washing his hands clean, Mr. Olu drove back to the hospital, his expression unreadable. Back in the hospital room, he picked up the healthy twin, his only child now, and placed her in his wife's waiting arms. Fumi smiled, exhausted but overjoyed. She never knew. She would never know. She had given birth to twins, but now only one remained. Anne grew up in the lap of luxury, adored and cherished. Whatever she wanted, her father gave her. It was as though Mr. Olu was trying to erase the sin of his past with generosity. But neither Anne nor her mother ever suspected the truth, that the perfect life they lived was built on a terrible secret. By the time Anne turned 7, Mr. Olu and his wife, Mrs. Fumi, began to notice something unusual about their daughter. She was painfully shy, unnervingly quiet, and almost too gentle for the world they knew. Her softness wasn't just a personality trait, it was a vulnerability. The world could be cruel, and they feared that one day Anne's kindness would be mistaken for weakness, leaving her open to hurt. Her mother often sat her down, trying to teach Anne about the harshness of life, warning her that not everyone would be kind in return. But no matter how many cautionary tales she shared, Anne remained unchanged. It was as if she simply didn't have a bone of anger in her body. At 12 years old, Anne sat cross-legged on the plush sofa in their grand living room, eyes glued to the massive 19-inch flat-screen TV. A commercial played, an advertisement for St. Michael's Secondary School, the most prestigious institution in the country. She watched in awe as the screen showcased marble-floored hallways, state-of-the-art classrooms, and students dressed in neatly pressed uniforms. It was a school for the elite, the best of the best. Excited, she ran to her father. "Dad, I want to go to St. Michael's, please." Mr. Olu hesitated. This was not just any school. It was a breeding ground for the richest, most powerful families. But he had never denied Anne anything before. After a pause, he nodded. "All right, if you pass your final exams with flying colors, I'll enroll you there." Anne beamed, hugging him tightly. "Thank you, Dad." From that moment on, she studied harder than ever, pouring herself into her books. And when the time came, she passed the entry exams with ease, securing her place in the prestigious St. Michael's Secondary School. The morning of her first day, Anne stepped through the grand iron gates of St. Michael's, her heart brimming with excitement. The school was everything she had dreamed of, modern, luxurious, and perfect. Everything around Anne radiated perfection. The towering glass halls, the state-of-the-art classrooms equipped with projectors, the elite tutors hand-picked from the best. It was a world unlike any she had known, a dream come true. But what Anne couldn't see, what no newcomer ever saw, were the shadows lurking beneath the polished facade. Beneath the surface lay secrets, buried deep within those walls, whispering of a past Anne never knew was hers. And as she stepped further in, the truth waited in the dark, watching, waiting to be unearthed. It all began that very first day. As Anne stood by her locker, organizing her books, she overheard two girls whispering nearby. Their voices were hushed, their words laced with fear. "Who knows what happened to John?" one of them murmured. "I heard he got in trouble with the F2, and now he had no choice but to withdraw," the other girl replied, her face tense with panic. "Did he really withdraw?" the first girl asked cautiously. "Or was he made to?" She hesitated, lowering her voice. "Disappear." The weight of that final word lingered between them. Their eyes locked, filled with unspoken terror, before they quickly disappeared into their classroom, fearful they had been overheard. But they hadn't seen Anne. She had been standing only a few feet away, every word sinking into her mind. Who or what was the F2? And why were students mysteriously vanishing? Anne shook off the thought. She was finally here, in this elite institution her father had sacrificed so much to get her into. No rumors were going to ruin her first day. Little did she know her nightmare was just about to begin. It was in that very classroom that she saw them for the first time, Farouk and Ferdinand, the F2. The two boys who would turn her life into a living hell. A few days later, Anne received a folded note passed to her by a male student in her class. She unfolded it. It was an invitation. Farouk wanted to meet her after school, alone, in a secluded area behind the school building. He had noticed Anne the moment she arrived. She was beautiful. And when Farouk wanted something, he got it. Anne ignored the letter. She was here to study, to make her father proud, not to get caught up in distractions. But in this school, saying no to Farouk was a mistake. Farouk and Ferdinand were the governor's sons. Their wealth, their power, untouchable. No one dared refuse them. And Anne, with that single act of rejection, had just made herself an enemy. The torment began. Every morning Anne arrived at school only to find the locks to her locker replaced, her books gone. Some days she had to endure class without her notes or writing materials. Other times she found her school bag, her textbooks, everything drenched in urine. But through it all, she never fought back, never complained, never told a soul. At home, when her parents asked how school was, Anne forced a smile. "It's great," she would say. She couldn't bear to tell her father that the place he had paid a fortune for was suffocating her. She convinced herself it would pass, that one day Farouk and Ferdinand would grow tired and leave her alone. She hoped that the torment would stop, but it didn't. It only got worse. The bullies grew bolder, and Anne's silence made Farouk and Ferdinand even more fearless. And then, one late afternoon, it happened. After sports practice, Anne was in the girls' dressing room, changing back into her uniform. The space was quiet, empty. Then the door creaked open. 2 boys stepped inside. Anne froze, clutching her shirt. Boys weren't allowed in here. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. They didn't answer, they just stood there, watching. Then, one by one, they began unbuckling their trousers. Anne's breath caught in her throat. A sickening realization hit her all at once. They weren't here by mistake. They had come for her. Before she could react, the 2 boys lunged. Rough hands grabbed her arms, dragging her back. Fingers tore at her shirt buttons. She fought, she kicked, she screamed. No one came. It was as if the entire school had vanished. 30 minutes of struggling, 30 minutes of clawing, fighting, pleading. Anne's voice had gone hoarse. Her body was growing weak. She was losing. And just when she thought she had no strength left, the door burst open. There stood Gloria, a classmate. The girl had stepped into the dressing room by accident. She hadn't noticed the "Do Not Disturb" sign hung at the door by the attackers, placed there with Farouk and Ferdinand, who had sent them to break Anne to teach her a lesson. The 2 boys bolted, hurrying out of the room. And as Anne sat there, her vision blurred with tears, a voice spoke from the doorway. "You will continue to suffer," Gloria said. Anne looked up at her through tear-streaked eyes, still trying to steady her trembling body. Confusion clouded her expression. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a breath. It was the first time Gloria had spoken directly to her, and yet her words sent a chill through Anne's spine. Gloria's expression was unreadable. "You can't win against the F2, Farouk and Ferdinand. You have to give in to their demands or they will make your time here a living hell, and they won't stop. Not until you either withdraw from this school or expel yourself. You won't survive their torment. You either give in or leave St. Michael's Secondary School." Anne's confusion deepened. "What do you mean, expel myself?" she asked, her voice laced with disbelief. Gloria's words sounded foreign, unreal, like something out of a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Gloria sighed, shaking her head. "Farouk's father, the governor, is the true owner of this school, but that's a secret not known to the public. That's why you can't report Farouk or his cousin Ferdinand to anyone. Not to the principal, not to the authorities, not to anyone. John tried once, but his end was tragic." Anne stiffened. Gloria's voice dropped lower. "Fighting the F2 is like fighting the law. They tormented John until he withdrew from this school. And then he disappeared, just like the others before him. Anyone who crosses the F2 always disappears from this school. Always. The last was John, and you don't want to be next." Gloria's words sliced through Anne's heart like a blade. Farouk and Ferdinand are far more dangerous and ruthless than you think, Gloria continued. You were lucky today, but next time you might not be. I'm only giving you advice. If you want to stay in St. Michael's secondary school, you must give them what they want. With that, Gloria stood abruptly, glancing around before walking away, leaving Anne frozen in place. During lunch break, Anne sat alone in the cafeteria, staring at her untouched food, her body trembling. She could still feel their hands grabbing her, still hear the terrifying words Gloria had spoken. And then, as if the humiliation she had suffered earlier wasn't enough, the nightmare continued. Farouk and Ferdinand strolled towards Anne, their faces twisted with cruel amusement. They didn't just sit. They surrounded her. They began with insults. You think you're special? Farouk sneered, pointing mockingly at her. You think you're the most beautiful girl in this school? Anne said nothing. You're ugly, both Farouk and Ferdinand chorused, their laughter echoing through the cafeteria. Anne bowed her head, her hands clenched into fists beneath the table. Humiliation burned through her, but she refused to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. But they weren't done. You're nothing but a dirty slut, Farouk spat. A cheap whore. Their voices were loud, deliberate. They wanted the entire cafeteria to hear. And they did. Yet, no one interfered. Everyone looked their way, but they all pretended not to see. Anne felt hot tears trailing down her cheeks. Then, as if their words weren't enough, Farouk picked up her bottle of water, unscrewed the cap, and slowly emptied it into her food, laughing as Ferdinand joined in. Anne couldn't take it anymore. She bolted up from her seat, pushing past them, and ran. She ran blindly, her vision blurred with tears, until she found herself in the girls' bathroom. She locked the door behind her, gripping the sink, gasping for air. Her world was crumbling. How had this happened? How had the school she had dreamed of for years, the place she had worked so hard to get into, turned into this? Was she really going to live like this? Give in to their demands? How could she force herself to date Farouk against her will? How could this be the only way to secure her place at St. Michael's? How? A sob tore through her throat as she looked up at the mirror, her reflection staring back at her. Then, the most terrifying thing happened. A voice spoke. You don't have to. Anne gasped, spinning around. No one was there. Her breath came in ragged pants as she turned back to the mirror. And then, her reflection spoke again. Over here, the voice said. It's me. Anne's heart nearly stopped. She stumbled backward, her eyes wide with horror. Her reflection was speaking to her. What? Who are you? Anne whispered. Don't be afraid, the reflection said. I am you, and you are me.
Anne's hands trembled. She paused, then managed to force herself to speak. If we are the same, then how are you speaking to me? The reflection's expression darkened. My name is Hannah, she said, then paused, as if lost in thought. Or at least, that's what my name should have been. I am your doppelganger. Anne's blood ran cold. What are you talking about? Hannah's eyes gleamed. I am your twin sister. That is what I was supposed to be. Before father... She hesitated. Anne's breath hitched. Before father what? She demanded. Please, tell me. Hannah's gaze locked onto hers. Before father murdered me. Anne's entire body turned to ice. Hannah continued, her voice eerily calm. He buried me alive as a baby, and I never had the chance to live. But I found a way to survive. I lived inside of you, hidden in the darkest corners of your mind. We came into this world together, and a part of me remained with you. even after my death. That's why you're so quiet, because I was the feisty one." Anne's stomach churned. Her hands flew to her mouth as tears spilled down her cheeks. Her father, the man she had loved, the man she had trusted, had murdered her sister. For years, she had lived a life of love, luxury, while Hannah had suffered in darkness, alone. How do I make it up to you?" Anne asked, her voice breaking. "How do we fix this?" Hannah's eyes burned with something Anne couldn't quite place. "There is a way," she whispered. "You must let me out. Give me a chance to avenge my death and to punish those who have wronged you in my absence." Anne hesitated. But how?" Hannah smiled. "Place your hand on the mirror," she said. "Our souls will switch. I will enter your body, and you will remain in the mirror, just like I did for years, but only for 2 weeks. When it's over, I will return you to your body." Anne's heart pounded violently in her chest. Terror filled her, but there was something else, something deeper, a trust, a connection. Her fingers trembled as she lifted her hand and pressed it against the glass. Instantly, a force pulled her in. The world around her blurred, and in that moment, Anne was gone. Hannah opened her eyes. She was free, and now it was time for revenge. Hannah walked back into the school cafeteria with an air of quiet confidence. The room fell into a stunned silence. Just hours ago, Anne had run out of this very place, humiliated and broken. But now she was back, her head held high, her expression unreadable. Farouk and Ferdinand, still basking in the satisfaction of their earlier torment, narrowed their eyes in surprise. She strode towards her tray, where her food still sat, now ruined and soaked in water. Without hesitation, she picked up the soggy burger, took a deliberate bite, and stared directly at the 2 boys. The cafeteria watched in eerie silence, the tension thick in the air. Farouk leaned toward Ferdinand. "She wants to fight," he muttered under his breath, smirking. "She has no idea who she's messing with." But what he didn't realize was that he wasn't looking at Anne. He was staring into the eyes of his own downfall. That night, Hannah sat in Anne's room for the first time, crafting a meticulous plan, a plan that would bring the truth to light and expose the man who had stolen her life. Justice was coming. The next morning, Hannah paid a visit to Mr. Olu's office, posing as Anne, his perfect, obedient daughter. She smiled sweetly, claiming she wanted to spend the day bonding with him. Her father, pleased by her sudden interest, welcomed her warmly. When he stepped out to use the restroom, Hannah sprang into action. She retrieved a tiny recording device from her pocket and carefully placed it inside the old typewriter that sat idly on her father's desk. By the time Mr. Olu returned, the trap was set. He had no idea that the daughter he had buried long ago was now sitting in front of him, playing a game he could never win. Later that evening, Hannah sat alone in Anne's room, her fingers hovering over her phone as she watched the recorded footage. The screen flickered, showing her father inside his office, his hands roaming over his secretary as they tangled in a heated romance. A slow, chilling smile spread across Hannah's lips. Everything was falling into place. The next evening, as the family gathered in the living room for their usual television time, Hannah made her move. "I found a great romantic movie," she said casually. "I thought you and Mom might enjoy watching it together." Mrs. Fumi, unsuspecting, smiled warmly. "That's thoughtful of you, dear." Mr. Olu, oblivious to what was coming, gave an approving nod. Hannah connected her phone to the massive 16-inch television and excused herself, claiming she needed something from her room. Once inside, she locked the door behind her and pressed play. The moment the video started, the atmosphere in the living room shifted.
The air grew heavy as the screen displayed Mr. Olu's unmistakable face, locked in a passionate affair with his secretary. The sound of his voice, the murmurs of seduction, the undeniable betrayal, it all played in excruciating clarity. There was a silence, and then the world shattered. Mrs. Fumi's face drained of color. Her hands trembled as she turned, staring at her husband with wide, betrayed eyes. Mr. Olu sat frozen, his jaw clenched, his world unraveling before him. He knew there was no way out. Days later, the divorce was finalized. Mrs. Fumi left him, taking more than half of his empire with her. His business, his wealth, his carefully built reputation, everything he had sacrificed for, destroyed in an instant. Mr. Olu had begged, pleaded, but there was no forgiveness to be found. His perfect life crumbled before his very eyes. But Hannah wasn't finished yet. Her father had been dealt with, but there was still one more battle left to fight. The F2. They had made her sister's life miserable. They had tormented, humiliated, and tried to break Anne. Now it was time for them to face their reckoning. Hannah returned to school with a new purpose, and this time she wasn't playing by the rules. That day, after school, something nudged Hannah to go to the back of the school building. She felt an invisible force pulling her, urging her to move. As she walked toward the third building in the school compound, she suddenly stopped in her tracks. A chilling sight unfolded before her. A junior male student plummeted from the fourth-story rooftop, his body crashing onto the hard ground. Hannah's breath caught in her throat. Her eyes instinctively darted upward. And there they were, Farouk and Ferdinand, standing on the rooftop, peering down with unsettling calmness. They had just pushed another student off that very same ledge. The realization struck Hannah like a bolt of lightning. The missing students weren't withdrawing from school. They were being erased, silenced forever. The F2 weren't just bullies, they were something far worse. And the school, the authorities, they were complicit. They covered it all up, hiding the truth from parents, from the media, from the world. As she stared at Farouk and Ferdinand, Hannah was able to see into their past because she was neither flesh nor spirit. She saw beyond the surface. She could hear the thoughts of the living. That was how she uncovered her father's secret affair. That was how she now knew Farouk and Ferdinand's darkest secrets. And that was how she knew what had truly happened to John. Farouk and Ferdinand's eyes locked onto her. They saw Anne standing there, wide-eyed, witnessing their crime. But they weren't afraid. Why would they be? It was just Anne, the timid girl who barely spoke, who shrank in their presence, who wouldn't dare challenge them. They gave her a cold, warning glare before turning away. There was no need to rush, because she was next, except they had no idea. The girl standing there was not Anne. Hannah was faster. She was smarter. She knew their every move before they made it. And she knew that reporting Farouk and Ferdinand to the school, or even the police, would be futile. The authorities were on the payroll of the governor, Farouk's father. They would bury the truth just like they buried those students. So Hannah devised a different plan. That very evening, she slipped like a spirit into the head teacher's office, moving like a shadow, unseen and unheard. The head teacher would soon delete the security footage, just as he had done with all the others. But Hannah was faster. Using her magic, she bypassed the system's security password. She extracted the footage and vanished into the night. The next morning, Farouk and Ferdinand prepared to strike. They were ready to make Anne disappear, just like the others. But when they arrived at school, they were met with a horror they never saw coming. As classes commenced, Hannah executed her plan. She created a secret social media account, anonymous, untraceable. Then, with the press of a button, she unleashed the truth. The footage of Farouk and Ferdinand shoving the student off the rooftop spread like wildfire. YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, every platform imaginable. The nation erupted. The story wasn't just about two boys anymore. It was a battle between the state government and the entire country. The F2 never saw it coming. And the worst part? The account that leaked the video was already deleted. All eyes turned on the head teacher. It was him alone who had access to the school's CCTV data. It was him who leaked the footage. The head teacher tried to explain his way out of the mess, but it was too late for Farouk and Ferdinand. Millions had saved the footage, making the entire city into a witness of the cruelty that took place at St. Michael's Secondary School. There were no more cover-ups, no more hiding. The truth was out, and Farouk and Ferdinand would finally pay for their crimes. The authorities came and took them away. Hannah stood at a distance, watching the F2 crumble as their world came crashing down. But she remained unseen. She had done a flawless job, eliminating her sister as a possible suspect. For Anne's safety, she had made sure of that. But her mission was not yet over. As she stood there, she felt another pull. This time, it was her father. Somewhere in the hidden corners of the outskirts of Lagos was Mr. Olu, repeating what he had done 18 years ago. Mr. Olu carried his unconscious wife into an unfinished construction site. His grip was firm, his expression ruthless. If Mrs. Fumi refused to retract the divorce and return his wealth, then she would meet the same fate as his unwanted child. This was the only way he would get back his wealth. He placed his wife on the bare ground, his heart devoid of remorse. His hands moved with practiced ease as he prepared to start the cement mixer. He would bury her inside these walls, erase her existence just as he had done before. But before he could act, the doors burst open. The police stormed in, their weapons drawn. "Freeze!" Mr. Olu's body stiffened, his breath hitched, his mind raced. Oh, how did they know? Who could have tipped off the police? No one else knew about this site. And then she stepped forward. "That's him," Hannah said, her voice clear and unwavering. "That's the murderer." Mr. Olu's world tilted. He stared at the girl before him. Anne! His daughter, his own daughter, had betrayed him like this. "Anne, how could you?" Mr. Olu bellowed, his voice laced with fury. "I am your father. I protected you. I gave you everything. How can you do this to me?" Hannah's eyes burned with rage. "You protected Anne." Her voice was sharp, cutting through the silence like a blade. "But you buried me alive, and now I will do the same to you." She turned to the officers. "Take him away." Mr. Olu fell silent. The weight of Anne's words suffocated him. How did she know? Who told her? Why was she speaking as though... The officers grabbed him, securing the handcuffs around his wrists. As they dragged him away, Mr. Olu turned one last time to look at his daughter. His eyes, once filled with power and arrogance, now held only confusion and fear. "What? Who are you?" he whispered. Hannah met his gaze, her lips curling into a cold, knowing smile. "I am the resurrection of your worst nightmare." And that was the last time she ever saw her monstrous father again. Anne and Mrs. Fumi stood over Hannah's grave, the weight of the past pressing down on them. No amount of sorrow could undo what had been done. No amount of regret could bring Hannah back. But at least now the truth was no longer buried beneath concrete and lies. Hannah was finally laid to rest, her memory honored, her name spoken with reverence. And Anne? She vowed to never forget her twin, to never let her sacrifice be in vain. Anne returned to school, not as a victim, not as a shadow of who she once was, but as herself. The bullying had ended. St. Michael's Secondary School was no longer a nightmare. It had become a dream once more. And even as Anne walked through those halls alone, she knew, deep in her heart, she was never truly alone. Because on the days that mattered most, Hannah was there, just beyond the veil of the living and the dead. Never too far, never too close. She remained a quiet presence, unseen but unwavering, watching over Anne in quiet devotion, rooting for her and cheering her on. Thank you so much for watching. Please do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to leave a like and a comment. We'll love to hear your feedback. Until we meet again, stay blessed, and I'll see you in our next story.